I think the only real-time or real presentness of the work, as far as it directly being influenced by its immediate surroundings or environment, is observing the structures and systems that are around. The kneeling impression that I did is based on looking at sidewalk patchwork here. The use of concrete and the use of rope border around the casting is because the contractors use this method to delineate new sections. They use a piece of rope instead of casting separate pieces, perhaps a shortcut. So when you look at the sidewalk and you see this twine pattern, it seems to say visually, this is a new piece of sidewalk. I'm interested in that translation of what I see, not the direct appropriation through found objects. But in my earlier works, back in graduate school, I appropriated found objects but eventually covered them with sheet lead. This is about as close as I get to found objects. It is not that I don't appreciate the found object, but I think it is, in a sense, about ownership of the image or object. It is a control thing. I allow the outcome to be unknown. I place variables that are unknown in my process, so I don't exactly know, nor am I entirely concerned with the end result. I'm not interested in the direct association that people have with objects, found or not. They bring with them past experiences, and to me, that becomes socially complicated. It disturbs the appreciation of the form and space in some way. Some artists want that social complication. They want those social constructs to be present in the work. Spatial summation deals with a summary of a space that exists around a fixed object or pattern. It is not meant to copy, commemorate, or commiserate with its referent pattern it was taken from, but it is meant to summarize and to demarcate a space between the viewer and the object. As it is, the shape is quite minimal and dependent upon the eye following the contours of the shape. The eye is forced to follow the line and surface details. The casting mold-making process is a mix of restriction and discovery. With lost form casting, you negotiate that boundary of where the pattern stops and the negative space around it begins with the restriction of the form walls. You can control how large the casting will be, but you cannot know for certain the outcome because you are essentially working with an unknown. That being what the space around that form will look like solidified with the form removed. The discovery of that form will dictate the display and how many are to be cast to complete the composition. The most significant part of the process in a casting is the separation of the casting from the mold. It is at that point that the casting acquires its own presence. It no longer has this connection to its maker or the mold it was taken from. It becomes reliant upon itself and the other surrounding objects to gather its identity. This is not a personification of the work, but a distinction about its presentness, and perhaps its separation from its origin. This drawing casting series and this cylinder print series both speak to this understanding of how a drawn line can fluctuate between two states of existence. The cylinder print series deals with a similar idea but in reverse. The 3D process starts at the beginning by the process of drilling aimlessly into a rectilinear form of wood. The process then continues to the lathe where the rectangle is turned into a cylinder. The holes from the drilling are made elliptical, and thus producing a pattern in a wood cylinder print that is unpredictable and spontaneous. The 3D object produces a 2D image. There is not a social, cultural, or political message behind the work. The simplicity of some forms is meant to develop the viewer's sense of observation. Through that development is a way to see the patterns and structures that I see, and how I translate them. It is not necessarily how to see a certain way, it is about understanding observation on different levels. The forms are essential. Nothing more and hopefully nothing less is shown to convey my observation. To me, it is every day, looking around, seeing structures, cars, spaces. It all affects the way that I walk through the street. I'm pulling things apart. How are they made? What would the space look like? What if? My work is directly affected by the fact that there is always something happening, always some space in transition, in flux. They are always rebuilding something, always taking up a sidewalk, never quite settled. It's the mind and ability to focus on the present condition. The will to trace and transfer is a symbol of impatience, inconsideration. There is a lack of satisfaction with what you have done. Casting, stamping, pressing, a way of making is how the forms are made. To reproduce more than one is a means of working through an idea. I submit to imperfection and the impossible idea that you can identically reproduce a form one after another. At least through these processes, there will always be the human error, some distinct set of decisions made for each consecutive piece. With each piece and process, it is difficult not to try to improve on that last one and to streamline the process.